Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this installment of Emory Executive Education's Business Over Breakfast. We are so glad to have you with us this morning as we are exploring a new facet of artificial intelligence. I'm Pam Tipton, Senior Director of Custom Programs here at the Business School. Advancements in AI can actually help with our decision-making by evaluating data and variables in really complex situations. And it enables companies and individuals, if you will, to move a little faster and with more well-informed decisions than we as humans can tend to do on our own without that assistance. But some experts offer that AI lacks the ability to use that human wisdom and discernment. And yes, artificial intelligence and machine learning tools have become more pervasive. And as they have, so have those interactions between humans and the business processes and the artificial intelligence. And as such, a growing area of research has focused on the ability of AI to replicate, or rather create a digital twin, if you will, of experts in their decision-making by layering in that otherwise missing component of wisdom and discernment through the use of machine learning. Today, we're joined by Karl Kuhnert, who is just sharing one of his students' stories post-pandemic. Karl's a professor in the practice of organization and management here at the Goizueta Business School. He's also associate professor of psychiatry at Emory School of Medicine and senior faculty fellow at the Emory Ethics Center. Karl's research focuses on how leaders cognitively, interpersonally, and emotionally develop over their life's course. His recent work includes using artificial intelligence to scale expert decision-making, often involving ethical dilemmas. He teaches leadership, emotional intelligence, organizational change, and professional ethics, and has been recognized with numerous awards for teaching and research. As with all of our webinars, Karl's going to spend the next 30 minutes or so describing his AI-based tool and the research-based insights that he has garnered from the use of this. And we'll have time for Q&A reserved at the end, but he does not mind being interrupted. And so we invite you to post your questions to the Q&A box. And if it seems like he needs to be interrupted, I'll just join him right in and ask those questions. You're also welcome to post in the chat as always. But before I hand things over to you, Karl, just a couple of quick highlights of our upcoming programs. If you're seeking to scale up your business impact, we invite you to check out our lineup of short courses that are upcoming. We'll post a couple of links in the chat. First is the Managerial Leadership Program, which Karl teaches in. It is about both individual and team leadership, includes a leadership assessment, executive coaching, and simulations. Next up is if you want to learn a little more about how AI might be impactful in your business, we have a 2-day course on leveraging AI in business. And then finally, our Sales and Sales Management MBA level course. You heard from Bob last Business Over Breakfast session. That is an MBA level 4-credit course. It's a condensed course coming up later this spring. Put the links in the chat. Thanks so much again for being with us. And Karl, over to you.
Hey, thanks, Pam. As everyone can see in front of you, the title of the presentation is Leveraging AI to Scale Ethical Decision-Making in Business. And I have a couple of gentlemen here, Dr. Edward Queen and Mark Keith of Merlin Intelligence. I could not have done this without them. Edward Queen is who we modeled in this simulation, who was very patient with us and just, I mean, he's a great guy, and boy, we learned a lot about ethics in the time we were together. And then Mark, again, is with Merlin, and it's invaluable to me as someone who helped think about how to actually do this simulation. My interest in AI, and I started a little bit of an exaggeration, right? Currently, there are AI developers and everyone else. I am astounded at the amount of new AI applications I am seeing every week. You know, unlike Google, that has the best algorithm for a search engine, there is no moat around AI. Everyone seems to be experimenting and creating applications. I'm interested in how these exponential technologies are transforming our lives and how we work. I am a professor at the program of organization and management. I'm not a software engineer, but I have been deeply embedded in this work for the past 6, 7 years now, and I'm so happy to actually be able to share this with you today. And again, my purpose in not only talking about what I'm going to talk about today, but also my purpose in doing this work is how we can use AI to make the impact we in our organization seek to make. The agenda, we don't have much time together, but I will be able to introduce you to this decision-making software that goes by the name of Tom, which I'll talk about in a second, and then walk you through an AI simulation to improve ethical decision-making. See a decision-making AI's potential to scale an expert's decision and have it available to others. And the last point here is we will take a minute or two, and that's probably about all we're going to have. Is I will show you an ethical dilemma, and actually how ChatGPT solved the dilemma. And I'll give you a chance to see if you can outwit ChatGPT. What we have here is the TOM actually stands for Tacit Object Modeler. And the way to think about this is that if we could take a look at the two types of business knowledge, we have explicit and tacit. Explicit knowledge is easy to pass along because it's written down and it's accessible. It is known knowledge. Tacit knowledge is garnered from personal experience and context. Tacit knowledge is what makes an expert an expert. And I use this, this metaphor of knowing a bike versus riding a bike. And, we could have a class, on knowing a bike. We could talk about air pressure in the tires. We could talk about seats, where to put the basket, how high should the bike be, what kind of bike, what's the structure of the bike, all that kind of stuff we could talk about, which is kind of known, right? That's explicit knowledge. But the most important thing about riding, most important thing about riding a bike, though, is balance. And it's so interesting. Balance is what I can't teach. That's something you have to learn on your own. And the thing I enjoy this point about riding a bike is that the way we do ride a bike is we fall, right? And that is actually falling forward. And the point of that is that every time we fall, the next time we ride a bike, we're less likely to fall. But this tacit knowledge is inherent in what experts use. And we all know experts. We all know people, by the way, that we all share the same data, but what they do is they see that data differently. And if I can make one more example of this, it's the grandmother test. There's always something that your grandmother makes or your mother makes. My mother happened to make macaroni salad, and for years, I had watched her make macaroni salad, and to this day, I cannot repeat what it tastes like her macaroni salad. And I have all the ingredients, I have everything, but it's not about me. It's not about the recipe. It's not about the explicit knowledge. It's how she puts those items together. The decision-making AI, this is actually what Tom does. It replicates human decision-making. And what's really, I think, again, really important about this is that we don't rely on big data sets of traditional AI, but tap directly into human decision-making and wisdom. And again, what we're tapping into here is tacit knowledge. Here is a thought experiment for you. Can you think of a critical decision that is made in your company where there's a lot at stake? You know, it impacts numerous people, competitiveness, profitability, maybe risk mitigation and control. What I'd like you to do is take something from your company, a critical decision that someone makes in your company, and what is that decision? And again, think about that decision in terms of what would it mean if we could duplicate it and share it with others who would benefit from that knowledge. So post it. I'll give you 30 seconds.
Carl, we've got those coming in. One says implementation of a new CRM. We've got admission decisions for independent education. Those are the first two that have come in.
Very good. Very
When to
good.
invest in modernizing technology, another CRM implementation. I'm certain there are lots of decisions that come into that just in and of itself, starting at the front end, of course. How about divestiture of a division of the company
Oh, absolutely. Oh, that's
or
good.
any M&A activity,
Any M&A.
right?
Yep.
The acquisition target, yes or no on that? Hiring for critical senior level roles. How about shutting down a division, in this case, a power plant, to fix a piece of equipment?
Oh,
That
good.
is a tough one, right?
Yo.
That's a tough one. Lots of
Very good.
product decisions and how to respond to a suspected cyber event, dealing with the cyber attack because of who it's affected.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah.
That's all that. Oh, those are just wonderful.
Credit risk assessments. That's the last one I'll add. There's some others.
Yeah, credit risk. Oh, I can't talk about all this. I'd love to have a discussion with you about this, but obviously I can't do that here. All right, so let me just finish this thought. Again, what if you could replicate the best decision maker of your experts in these critical areas that you just mentioned and make their judgment and advice available to others? You know, others who could use it. How helpful would it be to have this, we'll call it right now, this digital twin? How helpful would it be to have this second opinion from your expert available 24/7? That is, that expert, you don't have to worry about whether they're gonna be in the office that day, right? And one of the things I like to make this point that, you know, when I say, you know, how useful would it be to have this digital twin as a second opinion, is actually the way we think about Tom, is that we would like to have this available where someone could easily access this decision and how an expert would make this decision. And we're not here, and we don't actually see this as a technology that is going to substitute for the expert. We're not literally putting people out of work here, because as I talk about this, we have to have the expert in order to duplicate their decision. And one other point here, just to make this clear, is that depending on how quickly life changes in your company and how quickly things move, there's often the requirement to if you will, redigitize that expert. And it could be a year later, it could be 5 years later, it could be 6 months later. All of that depends on the speed of change within your industry. Let me talk a little bit here about the simulation itself. And the simulation is that you are approached by a private donor. And the good news is that the donor wants to give you a sizable dollar gift to your nonprofit. And the donation is significant because, like any NGO, any nonprofit, is that your organization depends on these gifts. So again, what makes this so interesting is that NGOs really would love to take the gift. They need the money, but it's also very, very important and challenging when someone gives you that gift and you don't know really who they are. So the difficult question for any nonprofit is, should our nonprofit decline this gift from this individual or organization? And so what we have here are a few steps that I'll go through fairly quickly in how we use this technology. The first, and obviously the most important thing, is you have to have an expert. And they have to have usually have years of experience and demonstrated wisdom in making that critical decision. Step two, and this is where we were able to enroll Dr. Queen of the Emory Center for Ethics. And this is a question or a decision that Dr. Queen makes on a fairly regular basis for clients. And that question is, do I decline the gift? And you should know that this is a hard decision for this NGO to make, because they really want the money. They need the money. But there may be circumstances that, and this is what this simulation is about, is, so what are the variables that I need to know before I can decline this gift? And so we have what's called the next step is elicitation, which is essentially interviewing, in this case, Dr. Queen. And what you see here is a Google product. And what we're using here, this Jamboard, and what we're doing, and this is, if you can think about this, Dr. Queen is in the room, and what we're doing is we have this posted on a whiteboard. Actually, it's actually a portrait on a whiteboard. It's quite a large whiteboard. But what's interesting is that we can see, and we ask, well, like Dr. Queen, is what do you think about when you think about making this kind of decision? And so what you see here is the yellow are in fact the variables that he's come up with, and the blue boxes here, sticky notes, are actually the variables themselves. And just to give you a kind of a sense of this, is that on this particular variable, who is the potential donor? What is the reputational risk here? And as you can see, and I won't go through this, but again, the variables here, or I'm sorry, the measures here are quite extensive, right? You have, how the stakeholders respond to the decision. What, if anything, would be the magnitude of the damage? Is there a history of a conflict in the organization? These, again, are fairly complicated measures, which is what you would expect with an ethical decision making. And we have another one here. Does this gift operate in conflict with your core values? Does the potential donor want you to shift your priorities in a way that would significantly shift your work? And as you can see, in some of these, some of the variables just require a yes/no response. What we have here is all the variables and the measures in a graph here. And the question, of course, is, should our NGO decline this gift from this individual organization? And again, this is not a decision. This is not a decision tree. It's just a specification table. And I just want to point this one thing out to you, since we're here, is that, again, we're going to be putting all of this material into Tom. And what we have here is the decision. And if you can see, this is kind of, and one of the things that I really think is powerful about this technology is that there's a red line that actually goes from the question to this variable and measures is, does the source of this gift undermine your core values? And for Dr. Queen, if that answer is yes, then the answer is, oh, by the way, you do reject the gift. So it's a rule that we can actually put into this specification table.
Hey, Carl.
Yes.
Quick question. Larry was asking, why is the question being asked phrased as accepting versus declining? Can you comment on that?
Yeah, well, we do that largely because it makes it a little bit less cumbersome, because we don't want to have this model that has 40 variables in it, all the ways we would accept something versus things we wouldn't accept. And so that would make it a very, very huge model, and it would take us, I mean, it would take a long time to actually duplicate Dr. Queen. And you'll see, even here, if I could move on, even here, we're talking about 14 variables. And so this is actually, for me, the real crux of the software. And so what's happening here is that Dr. Queen actually teaches Tom the software through scenarios. And so what we're doing is we're taking Dr. Queen's 14 variables and measures, and what Tom is doing is creating scenarios where Dr. Queen will answer the question, do I reject this gift? All right, and so this is what a scenario looks like in just one of them. And so what we have here, again, are 14 variables. And on this particular scenario, let's just say this is the first scenario, is that what we have now, we don't have, again, all the options here for all the different measures, but we're taking one here. And this is what Tom is doing. Tom is presenting Edward with this scenario. And here are the measures, right? Does this potential donor want you to shift priorities in a way that would significantly distort your work? Yes. That might be a red flag, right? And so, are you willing to accept the pressure and hassle of accepting this gift? Yes. Well, and so as you can see here, I mean, this is an ethical decision. So it's going to be tough. And what we did is I was able to do this with two of my EMBA students, and these EMBA students are all mature. They all have held executive positions, and I'm having them actually go through these scenarios. And so what I've done here is actually give them 22 scenarios, and they're making a decision after looking at each one of these variables with their measures. They're making the decision: do I decline the gift or not? And so we get through the 22, and I have them take, it takes about a minute and a half a piece to look at these. And they go through them, and at the end, I actually give them feedback on how well they did against Edward. And it was very interesting, because the first 22, they go through this. And I'll tell you about this and how we get this in a little later, but what happened was we had about 40% of them actually had correct responses. After they go through those 22 scenarios, and I give them feedback, I give them now additional feedback. And again, one of the really cool things about this software is that what Tom begins to learn from Dr. Queen is what he values. And so it actually, if you will, prioritizes the variables that Dr. Quinn looks at, which include, what policies do you have about accepting gifts? Does the potential donor want you to shift your priorities in ways that would significantly distort our work? What about our reputation? And I just want to point out all of these variables are important in actually, going through these scenarios. You just don't look at the top three, but all of these actually are quite important. But what's cool, and again, Tom is learning about what Dr. Queen uses in terms of the variables to make his decision. And so what we do is after we give them the feedback on how they did, and after they learn more about what Dr. Queen values, we give them another 22 scenarios, and lo and behold, that number bumps up to 70% accurate, right, with Dr. Queen. So there is learning that's taking place here in this simulation. Once we get through, and we have now a digitized version of Dr. Queen, we can validate it, and this really depends on how Tom is being used, the decisions being rendered. Oftentimes, if we're working with banks, we have thousands of data points that we can look at and see how well Tom did, or the digital twin did in what was done in the past. And so again, there are very, very creative ways here of actually validating that digital twin.
Hey, Karl.
Yes.
We have a question here. So Honyan, I hope I pronounced that correctly, was asking, will the scenarios that you laid out, how do they translate, or how do you address or make sure you don't have bias in there that skews towards some desired outcome?
And again, this is what I think is, really quite fabulous about this, is that, when we're digitizing an expert, we know who the expert is, right? We know who they are. And so, unlike big data sets, and where, there could be inherent bias in the data that's collected, at least who the person is who's making this decision. And again, we can validate this, and if it looks like it doesn't validate against previous data, then we may have to redo it or find another expert.
So you're saying the expert doesn't have a vested interest, so there's technically not a desired outcome?
Yeah, but we also know, and the most important thing is transparent, is that we're transparent here in the person that we digitize. And we wouldn't want to put someone out, obviously, and digitize someone who wasn't, ethical or didn't have the wisdom. It's kind of interesting. I didn't mention this, but when we think about experts, it's not always, and you're not going to be surprised by this, but it's not always the person who has the position. We've gone into organizations where the employee was actually the expert and the supervisor wasn't. And that makes sense because the supervisor's got other duties. This person's more up to date on what's going on. And anyhow, and so it's really got to be the expert. And like I said, in most companies, people know who the expert is, or the experts are. Now I'm going to show you something that I found. Well, let me read this to you, and I was again astounded by this. And so what we did is we took the data from the two classes, my two MBA classes, and we put it into ChatGPT and asked some pretty good probing questions to ask them to give us the results from these two classes, because we had success rates, and anyway, we have this data. So we put it into ChatGPT, And this was the summary, and there was a lot of information, information again from ChatGPT on what we did. But this was the summary, which is analyzing both data sets, right, reveals a solid and consistent ethical orientation in decision-making among the participants. Here's where it gets interesting. Core values, organizational policies, stakeholder perceptions, and the potential for damage to your reputation significantly influence decisions. Well, these variables were the variables that Dr. Queen prioritized, but I did not give those to ChatGPT. But yet ChatGPT used this as a way to talk about the importance of these variables in making this decision. Even in complex scenarios, the tendency to prioritize ethical considerations over financial benefits underscores a deep commitment to ethical integrity. This last point has meaning for me as well. The variability in specific scenarios, right? So there are going to be scenarios where there's a great deal of variability in them, which means there's probably a lot of agreement and disagreement in these scenarios. So the variability in specific scenarios suggests opportunities for further development of decision-making tools like the digital twin, especially in providing nuanced guidance for complex ethical decisions. So, you know, if I'm teaching ethics, what I'm going to do next with ChatGPT is see if I can figure out a little bit more about the variability in these scenarios, and see if I can learn something from that to help bring some knowledge for some suggestions for my students. All right. So again, really quite powerful. And so let me move on here and just do one last thing, which is, this was a scenario I got at a institution, and they were kind of quizzing me and how I would handle it. And so so what I did is I've been, over the last year, I gave this to students a few times, and I'll let you think about how you would handle this. You are a department manager. You have an employee who is very bright and highly productive. This employee is a keeper, right? However, the employee is pretty ambitious and impatient, and often shares ideas with your boss, a director first, rather than sharing them with you. Ooh. In this case, the employee has pitched their idea to your boss, who loves it. The boss has sent you a note indicating that he wants to implement the idea immediately, sharing highlights of the concept and suggesting that you contact the employee for details. You realize this is an idea the employee shared with you about a month ago, and you explain that it was not feasible and why. How do you react in this situation? How would you handle it? And what would you prioritize here in handling this dilemma? Post it. What do you think? Give you a minute. What are you thinking about here? And what do you want to do first?
Your first commenter says, put ego aside, Karl. Kudos to the employee for the initiative, and then prioritize improvements.
Oh, gee, see, all right, see, that's awesome. Look, Can I tell you, what do you think I get from my, I did this last week, by the way, from my undergraduate students. I wondered, how would they handle this? You know, not exactly what not mature leaders at this point, but what would they do? And I got responses that you wouldn't believe that were all ego. That's all it was about. That's all they wanted to talk about. At one point, I could almost characterize what they thought about, right? And what was it? It was, how many years am I going to get for justifiable homicide? I mean, that was how bad this was, because obviously this employee was casting a huge shadow over them. So here's what ChatGPT said. In this situation, it's essential to remain professional and handle the matter with diplomacy. Firstly, you should thank your boss for sharing the idea and expressing excitement about it. You can acknowledge that it's indeed a great idea, but also indicate that you had discussed it with the employee a month ago and explain why it was not feasible. Then you should reach out to the employee and thank them for sharing their idea. Reiterate the fact that you had discussed it with them a month ago and explain the reasons why it was not feasible at that time. However, let me see if anybody got this. However, you should also ask the employee to share any new information or insight they may have that could make the idea workable. Once you have a better understanding of the employee's perspective and have gathered any new information, you can discuss it with your boss about the idea's feasibility. And if it's not feasible, you can explain the reasons why and offer an alternative solution. If feasible, you can work with the employee to implement and credit them for their contribution. So the key here is to handle this situation professionally, acknowledge the employee's contribution, and ensuring that your boss understands the history of the idea and any previous discussions. By doing so, you can maintain a positive working relationship with both your boss and the employee, while also ensuring that the decisions are made with a thorough understanding of the situation. And here's where you drop the mic, right? Okay, so look, there's a number of ways that you can handle this. It's also very effective, but I can tell you that none of my undergraduates would have thought about this. And in fact, I got some blowback from some MBA students who thought that I should have taken that employee aside and had a discussion with them. But here's what I loved about this, right? And why I was so impressed was what ChatGPT here actually did was found a win, a win, a win, and a win. What they found was a win for the employee, a win for the employee, the boss, the win for you, the manager, and also a win, a potential win for the company. And so again, quite impressive, and made me think about doing this more with many of the ethical dilemmas that I have, and seeing how ChatGPT deals with the dilemma. And so, final thoughts here. And again, these aren't necessarily surprising here, but as complexity, uncertainty, and risk increase, the reliance on human expertise also increases. I don't know, I'll say this, but for the foreseeable future, right? In the future, by the way, I'm not sure what I used to think about future in terms of years. Now I think in terms of 6 months. That's how fast we're moving in terms of AI. But decision-making AI converts, again, what it does do is it converts complex thinking into guidance for us. The quality and speed of decisions makes the expert level create a competitive advantage. And, you know, with speed being so important today, having something like ChatGPT as a second opinion could make things go much quicker, much smoother. And again, we're seeing this all the time, that decision-making AI can create opportunities for new markets. we all may be, and again, this is sort of where I'm thinking about going with Tom in the near future here, but we all may be learning soon from decision-making twins of experts. And when we think about this, this would be a fabulous way to do, if you will, training into development. Because, I mean, who do you want to learn from? You want to learn from the expert. And having that digital twin available that from you to learn from, I think is just an amazing opportunity for companies, for institutions. So with that in mind, I think my time is up, and so I'll hand it over to Pam.
Not handing over, Karl. We've got some questions here, and that I think everyone would really love to hear your thoughts on. And I'm not going to go in order of submission because one that just came in, I think, is interesting to think about. So, what if the reliance of human input provides the wrong outcome? Working with bad data as input could potentially yield bad decisions. So, how do you take into account for this?
Well, this is what we do, though. We're actually going to validate. We're going to do our best to validate the twin, right? To make sure that it's making decisions that were consistent with past decisions where we had committees make decisions, right? So there's always a chance here. There's always a chance to actually check on this digital twin. And by the way, there will be times, even within let's say months, where you realize that the digital twin isn't making the same quality decisions, and what you may have to do is again redigitize that expert for what's new. I mean, I just the thing that just is kind of remarkable is just how think about we could have a twin as a physician, right? And then we go through COVID, right? Many of the decisions that physicians make, depending on what their specialty is, you now had to take into account COVID. And so, I would imagine if we were working with physicians, that we probably would have had to redigitize them after COVID. And so, yeah, no, this is a very flexible model where it doesn't take, it takes about an hour, maybe more than an hour to actually go through the elicitation with an expert, an hour. And it could take, and in Dr. Queen's case, it took him about 85 scenarios. And what was so, again, what is so amazing about this technology is that we got to 85 scenarios, and the software, Tom, basically says, I don't need any more information from you. I know what you're going to say next. And so we can literally get to 95% accuracy with the digital twin.
So, Karl, does the digital twin allow the layering on of multiple experts on the same type of decision?
Yes, we can do that. We can do. I'm not sure we can do committees, but we could do a sample of 3 or 4 people, maybe 5 people. I mean, we could probably do more, but I'm just saying, yes, we have done it in the past where we've used multiple people.
So, Suchitra asked, to understand when there are humans in the organization, why might AI be used or needed to solve ethical decisions? Can it potentially perform better and more ethically, or weigh decisions better than human beings with more time and experience? Or rather, is it more about the complexity of the decisions?
Well, I think it has often to do with the complexity of decisions. Now, it shouldn't be a surprise, right? That I'm trying to show the efficacy of using these decision-making twins, and of course I gave myself the toughest task, which is to digitize an ethical decision, right? This is, again, it's very, very tough to do, and I think what we showed is that we can use this in a way that we might be able to speed up decision making, but also, I mean, I think this in the hands, right? This in the hands of CEOs, of NGOs, to have this in their hands would be very, very valuable as a second opinion.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think at present, you're using it to help teach decision making, especially given the input you've received, I mean, the outcomes you've received as you view the simulation.
Right.
Is that right?
Yep. And and again, that one more thing about this, and one more thing about this technology, is that literally we can put this on your phone, right? And the cool part is you can have again, this Dr. Queen's 14 variables, and then you put in the context that impacts you, and you can get a decision automatic, literally within seconds. You get a second, and you can get the digital twin's opinion whether you should reject that decision instantly.
So, Karl, is there a limit to the number of variables that you can input? Because Bryant Johnson asked, wouldn't you have to identify all of the variables up front? And as you think about very complex decisions, those could be innumerable.
Yeah, it's so interesting. I went into this thinking that too. And I was wondering, how could you, I mean, there's so many variables, but guess what? This is the interesting thing. When experts make a decision, they're not looking at 10,000 variables. I mean, it's astounding to me, as many times as we've done this, is that, even complex decisions like this ethical decision, it took 14 variables. And that's literally what he's thinking about, right? And so, and again, not all these variables, by the way. And the other thing is too, I was just one of the things that strikes me is experts use that data differently than non-experts. And as a non-expert, we create this enormous list of things that we need to think about. But the expert doesn't really need that many because they're looking at it through an expert's eyes. And so while there may be, as a novice, I could go in there, I probably come up with 50 things that I would think about, but they're not thinking about 50 things. They're thinking about the things that are most relevant into this situation.
Yeah. So, Karl, this is an interesting kind of comment and thought that I'd love for you to comment on, is whether a tool like this might actually increase transparency and therefore could have positive or potentially negative consequences as a result of that, because it can distill to those variables that were key in making a decision. What are your thoughts about revealing the variables for any decision? And if you think about it in a larger sense, taking up to the corporation level, being more transparent, for example, with shareholders on earnings calls, not just in more day-to-day decisions. What are your thoughts about that, increasing the level of transparency?
Well, I think it largely depends on the decision, right? And this is something that I think is important here to the audience, that the algorithm that is created by the decision maker, she owns that algorithm, and it's really up to her to decide how she wants to use it. And in a case we do this for an organization, you might want to be careful about how information around this algorithm gets disclosed. But that's really up to the again, to the expert and to the company, and decide who should see this and who shouldn't see this.
Mm-hmm.
Because look, I mean, look, what we're doing here, I mean, again, we should think about this. This becomes a real competitive advantage. One of the things, okay, I don't know if I should say this. One of the things that is really hard for me is that, we've done work for organizations, and these organizations see Tom as such a competitive advantage, and they won't give me their data, their success data, because they don't want me to share it with the world, because this is a competitive advantage for them. And so, and those of you who are, I think if you're interested in making money with this, all of these experts, if you will, depending on what you want to do with this, could be commoditized, right? You could make a commodity here.
Well, I see loads of value. You and I have talked about this, is especially a lot of value as a teaching tool, as you are teaching newer professionals in a particular realm. I mean, you've shared with me the work you're doing with in the School of Medicine, for example, and perhaps as you think about teaching accounting practices, even when you've got accounting auditors you're teaching, and what to look for. I mean, I can see how there's loads of opportunity, especially as a teaching tool, and as several have commented in the chats, of maybe validating a decision, using it as a second opinion, so to speak, to make sure your thinking is on point.
No, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, I think we're all going to be, I think we're all going to be learning from decision twins, right? I mean, if we're going to learn from someone, why not learn from the expert? And think how much more streamlined many of our training and development programs would be if we were learning from the experts, right? And not spending all our time learning irrelevant information we tend not to use in training and development programs.
That is true, but I'll reiterate something someone posted in the chat, a number of minutes ago. It's the trust but verify. I think that we always must keep that human component to trust but verify, because as several have noted, one wrong decision could essentially kind of cause potentially some pretty significant harm, and we wouldn't want to rely so much on speed, but rather taking the time to trust and verify. Well, Karl, thank you so much for sharing this really fun work and exciting work. We're honored to have you with us today, and appreciate so much you taking the time to explain the work you're doing and how that might be an impact for other business leaders going forward as they think about building in more AI capabilities in their organizations. And if you don't mind, just stop sharing. I'm going to invite my colleague, Tammy, to share what's coming next for our Business Over Breakfast sessions.
Thanks, Pam. And thanks again, Karl. A lot of great insight. And as Pam said, loads of value and opportunity with decision-making with AI, but there got to be considering of those ethical issues as well. So taking those into account. And so we want to make you aware of future Business Over Breakfast sessions, and hope that you can join us. March the 7th, Demystifying Gravitas. March 21st, how multicultural marketing is essential to drive future growth. And on April the 4th, we have another AI topic, how to talk when machine is listening, corporate disclosure in the age of AI. So these are three great and exciting topics. And so we hope that we see you on a future Business Over Breakfast with us. And before we leave, just want to share some more information about the short courses that we have coming up. Managerial Leadership Program that's going to be taking place April the 15th and 17th, as well as May the 22nd and 23rd. These are all in persons. Executive Communication and Leadership Presence is also going to be taking place April the 23rd and 24th. And we do have our very own Leveraging AI for Business short course that's taking place on April the 30th, May the 1st. If you're really interested in learning the fundamentals of AI and how to understand the language and be able to talk about it with your colleagues, this is a great opportunity for you to do this and come and get some learning in those 2 days. We do have our MBA level course, Sales and Sales Management, that you heard a couple of weeks ago. If you attended Bob Kelly's talk, this is a 4-credit course. So we ask that you join us for any of these opportunities to get more additional learning. The information there is available for you on our website, or you can contact my colleague Heather Default or myself to learn more about these courses. And we thank you again for taking the time out this morning. We hope everyone had a wonderful Valentine's Day yesterday. Have a great Thursday, and we'll see you again, hopefully in 2 weeks. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.